Bay West Church meets at 100 Emerson Road in Palm Bay at 11 a.m. on Sundays. We're glad you decided to check us out. God has a specific message of hope for your life and mine today. So listen up.
Storms come. They threaten us, scare us, and they damage us. Sometimes the storms come in different forms, but they carry the same characteristics. How do you deal with the waves of trouble that keep coming? How do you become unshakable?
Storm this last month. Wow, what an amazing setup there. So I was asking this morning, so since we had a hurricane, were you obligated to do a series on storms? And I would say no, but when Steve and Bruce and I sat down and planned out the calendar for the rest of the year back in the end of July, this was the load up for October 1. So I guess God knew what was coming and he directed us that way. But we were talking about storms. You know, I think every one of us, we really have a sense of this right now, don't we? I mean, we've just been through something we thought was going to be huge, and there's all the emotions involved. I know when we actually evacuated to Alabama, Katie, and we took my mom. My mom is now 86 as of September the 18th. So we took her with us and went back to Alabama. Not going to have her deal with all the storm stuff as well. And she went back to her house in Alabama, and then the storm followed us up over there. Because when we left, it was on the, you know what you went through it. It's over here, way on the right side of the state of Florida, about 20 miles. In other words, so we were really going to get it. And then by the time we got to Alabama, it shifted all the way over to the other side. So a lot of uncertainty there. But we really, all of us, we're putting you're putting up the board, you're putting up the shutters, you're finally pulling out the DVD for the first time in your life to figure out how you put up storm shutters and stuff like that, and it's just all a herring thing. It's beautiful in a lot of ways because you see your neighbors, they all kind of pull together and stuff. I mean, there's this dude, I only see him when there's a storm, because he comes riding through the neighborhood with his truck and his big tall ladder and says, "Hey man, you need me to help you put your storm shutters on?" I mean, he's a great guy, and he's a Christian too. That's amazing. It's funny how that works out. The righteous are generous, and he's so generous with his time. But we all understand this metaphor about storms, and really the Bible uses these storms. They use the actual stories about them, because it translates so well to our lives, doesn't it? It's not just the storms of the weather, because the truth is, and you know this, the most dangerous and damaging storms that you will ever go through will never be forecast on a weather forecast. They will never come through on the weather forecast. Jim Cantori will never be in the middle of the most dangerous storms that you and I deal with on a personal level, because they are times of trouble that hit us. And we know what those are. We know what those are. Those are when we think about the storms in our life, we know what they are. A lot of us have experienced them. A lot of us have experienced them in this last year or two. When a loved one dies, that's a storm. That's a storm. When you have to go home and you have to tell your wife or tell your spouse, "Honey, I just lost my job today, and I know we have a rent payment due or a house payment due, and I don't know where that's going to come from," that's a storm. When you come home from the doctor with the diagnosis that you really, I just knew it wasn't going to be that, but it was. And now you're in for a long battle that you've seen other people go through, and it's scary, and it's hurtful, and you don't really know what to do with it, and you're looking at your kids, and you're going, "How do I talk to them about that?" That's a storm. When you come home one day and your spouse says, "I'm leaving," that's a storm. That is a storm. And I think the storm, the physical storms that we know about when we talk about hurricanes and storms, I think one of the reasons the Bible uses them for a metaphor for the troubles in our life, because there's so many things that we understand when we see through eyes of a storm. The metaphor fits so well. Storm, when you think about it in the Bible, for those people, when you got to put it in their context, you got to realize a storm was probably one of the most destructive forces that they would ever encounter. Imagine it. You don't have a weather anything, any kind of service. There's no explanation of what's going on up there, and there's no radar, and you can't track it and all that stuff. We freak out enough with that. And imagine it just shows up one day and it's like, it's blowing everything over and things like that, and you're running for your house, which is not like cement block house or even to the standards of some of the least well-built houses we have today. Back in their time, where you're not talking about strong structures. It's one of the most destructive things that they could ever run into. You got to think, it was all, but as much as it was destructive, it was extremely common. Because you think about it, everybody at some point in time has been in some level of storm. You've heard the lightning. You've seen the lightning. You've heard the thunder. You've been, as a kid, afraid of what does that mean. And you've been in the middle of that. So it's something that people can identify with. But also it happens with little warning. It's so much like the storms in our lives, the troubled times in our lives. We don't get a forecast or a map out that, I'm going to walk in today and I'm not going to have a job tomorrow. You don't get that a lot of the times. You don't get the car accident that happens. You don't get the phone call that you didn't want to get. You don't get like, okay, on Tuesday of next month that's going to happen. We don't get that. They come with little warning. But storms also test your house. They test who you are. When we left, I was, I left and I was like, man, I just don't know if I'm taking pictures of things that were important to me. On the second floor, because I just don't know if that's going to be here when we get back. And I've got this smock, these smocks that, when they would let you when you go in with your wife to have the baby, right? And they dress you up in the stuff and with our first two children, with Anne-Marie and Susanna in Fort Worth, they let us, when I wore the smock, I came out and they said, okay, here's what we're going to do. And they inked up my kids' feet and then put them on there and then wrote their name and all that stuff. And so I've got that in my closet, and I'm looking at that and I'm going, I better take a picture of that because I don't have a good memory. And if something happens and that's gone, and someday I will want to know what that looked like. You just don't know with a storm. And I could go on, but we all get the point. It's a great metaphor for storms. But the truth is that in the Bible, there are a lot of accounts of storms and the uses of storms, the storm metaphor that's used to hammer home some really great principles about who Christ is and who God is meant to be in our lives. There's truths for us to trust. There's promises that we can gain hope from. And over the next few weeks, we're going to be looking at a lot of accounts in the Bible where it talks about storms. And you may have read these before, and I truly believe that God is going to touch your life in a special way and explain something to you, not because I'm smart or I got anything going on or anything, but He's going to talk to you as I occupy your time and explain some things about your life where you're at right now that you need to know and need to be putting into place some valuable information about your life and how you are to weather the storms that you're going through right now, because I'm guaranteeing you, at some level or another, everybody's dealing with a storm as we listen to the massive rain that goes down outside. Okay, but today what we're gonna talk about in Matthew chapter 7, we're going to talk about the first thing. This is the first thing that you need to know. When we run around, and I know when we first moved down here and you get the hurricane scare, everybody wants to know, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Well, here is the first thing that you need to know about withstanding a storm in your life. The name of the series is called Unshakeable. And the reason is because with Christ, understanding this, you can become unshakable. And we're going to talk about this in Matthew 7. You can turn your Bibles there now if you want to. It's verse 24. If you've got your smart device, open up your app, whatever you need to do, unroll your scroll, whatever it is, I don't care. Just read, and read along with me. It says, Matthew chapter 7, verse 24 says this. This is Jesus saying, "Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on a rock." And I see Jesus brings this metaphor of building your house on a rock. And you guys know, I'm from Fort Worth. I was in Texas. Foundation is a big issue. Foundation is a big issue down here, right? Where you build your house on, if you build it on ground that moves around, you're going to have some problems and some issues. And what he's saying is that people who hear what I tell them, who listen to this message that I'm giving you, who listen to how I tell you how to do life and listen to these things, and you put them into practice, not just hear them, but you really take them to heart and put them into practice, you are going to be like a person who built his house on a rock, on a solid foundation. You know, Jesus said in John 14:15 that if we obey him, if we love him, we will obey his commandments. And I've told you so many times that's not, well, if you love me, you'll do it. No, it's just, that's an evaluative situation. If you look at your life and you're obeying God's commandments, then you are loving God. You are committed into this relationship with Christ. And as you obey his commandments, that he's saying on multiple reasons, look, if you obey my commandments, you're doing the best thing for you. And you're making this so much easier for me because I want the best for you as we go through this. I want you back with me. I want you to do these things. This is easier on me, that you're loving me by taking, in other words, look at this way. You're loving me if you're taking care of yourself doing this. If you're taking care of yourself in this spiritual area by listening to what I say and listening and grasping the truth of what I'm telling you to do, and you apply that in your life, you're loving me by that. I'm going to make this real easy. You can say you love me if you're doing what I'm telling you to do, which makes it better for you to begin with. You know, the wise thing is to listen to Christ's words, but not just hear them, but we have to do them. You know, James wrote in his book, in the first, we're to be doers of the word, not just hearers only. And talks about, you know, if you just listen to the word and you don't put it into practice, you're foolish. You walk away like somebody who looked at their face in the mirror and walked away and forgot what it looks like. You forget your situation when you hear God's word and you don't put it into practice, and you think you know better when you walk away from that situation. You know, that's a mistake to be put in. What he's saying is the opposite of that is somebody who listens to God's word and puts it into practice in their lives. They're like a wise person who built their house on a rock. It says so, and the result of this building the house on the rock, of listening to Jesus' words and putting them into practice, is this in verse 25. It says, the rain came down, and the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. You know, I think if we blow through this, we can lose some of the symbolism of this that speaks directly to a lot of our situations in life. You know, the rains came, the streams rose, the winds blew. Those are important. They're not just something that Jesus said because it sounded figuratively. When I look at that, this is what God, when I see this, when I read through this, God brings us out. You got the rains that came down. I want you to think about those this way. These are the things that weren't there until the storm showed up. These are the things that weren't there before that are hitting you now. That's the rain. You know, it wasn't there until the storm got there. And it's coming down and hitting you. And I don't know about you, but most rain is not steady. I mean, there is some, but the worst rain is not. The worst storms are not. You have the big sheet of rain that comes up and pops you in the face, and this little bit of rain, then medium rain, and then, you know, and then little rain, you think it's over, and, you know, here comes a big thing that pops you in the face. And I think that is very descriptive of the types of trials and things that come into our lives when storms happen in our lives. They're all part of the storm. We may see them as disjunctive, but they're all part of it. You know, the big rains, we talked about those. You know, you lose a spouse. I had a friend this last week, you know, one of my buddies from high school messaged me and said, man, did you know Lee? Lee lost his wife. It's one of my buddies I went to high school with. She had heart failure, leaving 3 teenagers right there. Boom, unplanned, unknown, boom, and she's gone. You know, during the storm, I've told you about this. Yesterday, my wife and my oldest daughter went to a memorial service for a man who was putting on his hurricane shutters. Very good man. Putting on his hurricane shutters, and started feeling bad, and went to the emergency room, and he died. Boom, and he's over. And he's got 4 kids. You know, the oldest is my oldest daughter's age. The second oldest is 1 year older than Susanna. There's one that's Braden's age, and a boy that's Braden's age or about, and one that's younger. I don't know if he's exactly Braden's age, but him and Braden are always getting in a mess on Wednesday nights at food. So, I mean, so I equate them there. That's big storms. You're losing your job. That's the big storm. You have a car wreck. It costs you thousands of dollars, and you can't get to your job. That's a big storm. You're injured. You can't go into work, and you're an hourly worker. How am I going to make this money? That's a big storm. Relationships ending. Those are big storms. But they are not the only storms. You have the big rain. That's the big rain. The big rain is the big storms. You also have like the little rain, the medium rain. You know the medium rains are. That's like when you get a ticket, right? It's going to cost you money, but it's frustrating. And it always seems to come around. You know how that comes around when something else is going on? That's it. You get the medium rain. That's the ticket. That's when you break an arm. You can still work. But man, it's really uncomfortable and frustrating. That's when you have to get a tooth pulled. That's things like that. The medium rains are those things. Then you got the little rains. You stub your toe. Somebody cuts you off in the parking place. Somebody in road rage jerks right in front of you with a fish sticker on the back, usually. I love Jesus, but just not you right now. Right. Those are the little rains. And if you think about it, this is how the storms come in our life. The big rain, then the medium rain, then the little rain frustrate me, getting in a fight with my wife, getting upset with the kids. Something breaks, I don't want to go buy that, fix it. Okay, big rain, come right back. And we equate those all as separate things. We say, oh, those are just, oh man, I can't believe it, one more thing. No, that's all part of the storm. It's all part of the storm. The rains come. When I walked around the house before I left, I walked around, I prayed around my house, and I prayed for my neighbors. I walked down the street and prayed for my neighbors and stuff like that in their houses. And I'm walking down between my house and my neighbor's house, and all of a sudden I noticed this beautiful pot that's sitting out there. Before we left for the hurricane, I'm going, okay, great. And now all of a sudden, then I start concluding, wait a minute, that becomes a projectile when the hurricane comes through. And I'm looking, okay, great, there's all these 2x4s stacked by their house. That's great. Oh, there's an aluminum ladder. Okay, that's going to be great. That's going to head right down this little category and pop right into the door on the other side of the neighborhood, And that's kind of, when I look at those things that are harmful, maybe even that are harmless and maybe even helpful, those become weapons in a storm. That's what I look like when we talk about, you like this, see? You've got like the trampoline, right? This is from Hurricane Andrew, I believe, the trampoline. Then you got this, it was just like a piece of plywood pushed through a tree. Oh my goodness. A record into a log. Vinyl into a log. You would never think that, unless you watch like Steven Seagal or something like that a record would ever be like a weapon, but it could. That would hurt somebody. And that's what you have. But you have these things that are harmless or even helpful that now become dangerous in the midst of a storm. That's what it likes when it talks about the streams rose. When I think about the streams rose, what they are, that's when the things in your life that were harmless now seem to become harmful. The streams get higher. Those things in between the house, they'll become flying projectiles. What am I talking about when I said the streams are? Let's think about that. When you talk about the schedule that you had under control. When you get a storm, that becomes a problem because now you don't have as much time as you used to. The person that's so helpful at work and always wants to talk. When in the middle of a storm, they all of a sudden become very irritating and you want to pop them in the mouth, right? That's in the middle of a storm. When you're in the middle of a storm, the fun hobby that you signed up for and committed for 6 weeks, and you thought it was going to be great and it's going to be cool and crafty and all that stuff, and now you have no job, and you're like, I don't want to go and buy anything to be a part of that class or to do anything. I don't even want to spend time. I need to be finding a job or something like that. Now it's a problem. That's because the streams rose. Those are the things that were there before, being harmless, but now have become harmful. But there's another component to the storm that we miss a lot of times. It says, and the winds blew and beat against the house. The winds blew. You know what that is? The part of the storm that we ignore so often because we live with it a lot of the times. It's the things that come at you that you cannot see. What do I mean by that? Here's what I mean. There are outside forces, we know. In the Bible, we know there's outside forces, there's inside forces. Inside forces are our emotions and our fear and the things that want to drive us in the middle of the storm. When you're in the middle of some harmful situation or some tough situation, what happens to you? You start playing out scenarios in your head. You do, right? If somebody cuts you off in traffic, they are some kind of evil, murderer or something like that, and you just, they're just like, think they're better than everybody else, and you tell yourself this narrative. You're in a situation where your job's lost, and all of a sudden all your house is gone, all your possessions are gone, your memory has been erased from the face of the earth, and all these you just play out these scenarios. That's the fear that comes from inside, but it's not actually real. It's what we deal with. It's the anger, it's the frustration, it's the tension, it's the stress. That's the winds blowing at the house, but it's not only on the inside, but you have to remember, we work from an ideology where we understand that there are forces on the outside. 1 Peter tells us, 5:8 says, be alert and of sober mind. He said, your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a lion, like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. He is out to make this hard for you. We know from Ephesians 6:12, it says, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. There are things that Satan is putting that are actively on the outside that are trying to put weight on your house in the middle of the storm. Most of the times these crop up even more when there's something big, when there's a big storm going, or there's little storms going, and rains and all this stuff going on. Then those things, and here's the funny thing: it's like those forces work in conjunction with the big events, don't they? They make them harder. They seem to hit you at just the right time when you didn't need to hear that. It seems to be there, and it's designed to make you stumble and to make the house fall down. In 1 Peter 5:8, when it says the devil prowls around like a roaring lion, the mood and the tense of that verb it means it is consistently always happening. It's a present thing. It's happening all the time. This is not something that is over in a minute, or it's not a completed action. It is continually going. And so this is continually happening in yours and my life, and we don't see it most of the time. We don't see it. We have to know that we see the effects of it, but we don't see it. All these things come up at once, and it constitutes the storm together. And most of the time, we only think about the big rain, and we don't realize all the other things. And it fails us when we try to plan about how to deal with this. It makes us fail. It makes us afraid. It makes us act in ways that we would never act before, because we are afraid of what's going on. Usually the big rain, but there's so many other components that we have to be wise about looking at. That's what Jesus is talking about when he's talking about the storm. He's saying, look, when all of these things, when the rains came and the streams rose and the winds blew, that house that was built on the foundation of the rock did not fall. But consequently, on the other side, he says this in verse 26. It says, but everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. So somebody heard God's word, heard what Jesus said, that sounds good. I may try that, but I'm not going to put it into practice. Sounds really good. I'll admit to it. I'll agree to it, but secretly I'm going to do things on my own, on my way, put my things ahead of what God's things are. And he says that person's like a foolish person who built their house on sand, because when the rains come, the big rains, the medium rains, the small rains, when the streams rise, all the things around that you thought were harmless are now harmful to you. And when the winds blow, when those same things, because you're not exempt from the outside forces or the inside forces. When all those things come to bear on your house will fall, because it was built on a foundation of sand. Sand. Here's the interesting thing about those two houses. What's the difference in those two houses? Was there a smarter builder? Well, we don't know if the guy was smarter or not. We just know that he was called wise or foolish because where he chose to build. Did he have better, was his house like concrete block with the cement poured down in the holes, or was it like wood frame or what? We don't know that. Was it because he had a better job? Was he richer? Was that why he withstood? Or what was that? What was up? Why was he able to stand it? The only thing different between these two houses is what the foundation was, what they were built on, the foundation they were built on. One was built on the foundation of the rock, one was built on the foundation of the sand. Here's the problem with us. We get in the middle of a storm and we start looking at somebody else's house and we think it's because they've got the better job, better walls. We think they've got more money. They've got a 2-story house, and I've got a 1-story house. So if I had a 2-story house, mine would be better. When we get in the middle of the storm, when our kid walks away from the Lord, or when we have that problem with them and we can't seem to get through to them, we think, oh man, if I was just smarter like that person over there. No, not it. If I just read all those Dr. Spock's books when I was growing up, and if I, I don't know, you name it, if I'd send them to that preschool, no, that's not it. If I'd gone to every ball game, no, that's not it. The people that stand and they fall stand for one reason. They built their house on the rock or they built their house on the stand. It doesn't talk about the builder. It doesn't talk about the quality of the builder. It doesn't talk about the quality of the materials of the house. It says, where did you build your house? Period. End of story. That's it. The difference between the two is the foundation. And the first thing, if you're ever going to withstand a storm, all these things within your life is understanding that the foundation must be built, as Jesus is talking about metaphorically, but we all know and we see him illustrate it. He's saying, until you build your house on this truth that I am telling you upon me, you're not going to be able to withstand what is coming. You know why the foundation's important? Because everything in that house depends on it. If your foundation moves, your entire house changes. And a lot of us, we build our foundations on things that move all the time. They're not stable, constant, or reliable because only Jesus is. And we build our houses on those things. And when the foundations move, the whole house changes. And we wonder why we don't get along like we used to. And we wonder why, we don't have the time that we used to have. We wonder why we're always barking at each other all the time. We wonder why all of those things. And they don't settle out. Because we built our foundation as the wrong thing. He said, Jesus said, when our foundation is right, no matter what comes against us, we can be unshakable. You realize that? If your foundation is on Christ, maybe you say, I'm the person that freaks out all the time. Well, you know what? God has got a cure for your freak out. It's where you put your foundation. Foundation cures freak out. That's what happens. It will cure your freak out over time. And you'll begin to trust who God is and what it is. When James writes this letter, that we can have such confidence that when the storms come, when we get trials of every kind in every direction, you remember that part of James? James wrote in his letter, look, if you get hit with many trials from many sides, it says diverse trials from everywhere, every angle of different degrees, bearing, rain, all that stuff. You know what he says? He says, you can be so confident in Christ if your foundation is there. When you're hit with all of those things, you can count it all joy. Joy is the opposite of freak out. Freak out is, Joy is like, I don't like it, but I know it will work out, and I can't come through it. You can be, and I can be, unshakable. We can be truthful because we know that God is making stronger, making us stronger. We can know that all of God's promises are true. One of the things that it was great for, why that metaphor was so great for that time was because as chaotic as the storm was, when it hit the people of that time, they knew this: my God is still stronger than the storm. So as strong as this seems to be, and as chaotic as this seems to be, I know that I worship someone, I'm connected to someone who is stronger, and that gives me a confidence in the middle of confidence in the middle of the crazy. I don't have to just hang in there and freak out and not wonder what's coming next. I know that God is still there. I know that all of His promises are still true. I know all of the things where He said He's faithful, where He said He loves us, where He said He's working for His good and our good, where He said He's trying to bring people to Him. All of those things don't change because something unexpected or weird hits me. All of those are the same. Now I just have to work. How do I synthesize myself into this situation? How do you want me to respond, Lord? What would glorify you the most in this situation? That is always my best course of action in everything. Bruce and I were talking last week, and and one of the things that we try to do with our teaching here really is we try to make it very practical. Try to give some important things. That anybody, even if you don't follow Christ, you hear these things and you can hear some wisdom from God and you put them into place in your life and you can see the benefits of those things. Because the truth is this: anytime you start to follow God's wisdom, things ultimately get better. Because you're following the wisdom of the guy who created the whole system to begin with, right? So you're now starting to work within how it's supposed to work. The tough side of that is this: just because you follow a few things that God said, it doesn't necessarily mean that you've changed your foundation. I see this all the time. People come into church, right? and they hear a couple of good things, and they're in a tough situation, they lost their job, lost their family, lost whatever. Maybe they're just feeling a real emptiness in their life, and they come into church, and they come try a couple of things that God says to do. They hear it in a life group leader, they hear it in a song, they read their Bible, they hear that. I'm going to try a couple of these things, and wow, something got better. It's amazing. I'm going to church now. I tried something that Jesus said, and it got better. So I must be a Christian. But here's inevitably what I see happen so many times is what happens is things got better, and then when whatever problem that motivated the seeking for church or for God, when the tension from that is alleviated because things got a little bit better, all of a sudden people don't need Jesus that much anymore. And this is what you see. They start to fall away. They start to leave. They don't come back. And then you see them later, and they're not having anything to do with Jesus to begin with. And then ultimately, somewhere down the road, something goes crazy, something goes wrong, it obliterates again, and where do they seek? They look for God. And God, I followed you way back then. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. You tried a couple of things, but here's the problem. You never changed the foundation of your life, because your life's ideology and what you built it on and what you want it to be like and what you expected it to be, all of that is still the same sand that you were living on it before. You built a little outbuilding with a little walkway that connects Jesus to it, and you thought that was going to change your life, but it does not. Jesus says, when you hear what I say, I am the Son of God. You are completely separate from the universe, from the creator of the universe. You have no hope to get back except through me. And I'm going to die for you and take care of that. And if you will come and follow me, hear what I say, put these words into practice, and you bank your entire life on it. You shift the foundation of your life from the sand that you were on to my rock foundation, and you follow that, then you will last through to the end. And until that happens, we don't see it. And we see it all. It's not a change in our lives. This is not habit management. I'm not Tony Robbins. I'm not going to give you 5 things, to help you love your grandmother. I just can't do that. I mean, there's some wisdom in there that might do it, but it's all going to come back to this. I'll give you a little secret. Everything I say is going to ultimately come back to this. You need to have Jesus at the boss of your life. You need to have given your life to Jesus. You need to be coming back to Jesus. Jesus is the foundation for every principle. We could talk about all kinds of things, and we will. We'll talk about marital issues during this situation. We'll talk about financial issues during this series. You'll hear us talk about how do you deal with people in your job? How do you deal with people in your career? All of these type of things. We'll talk about conflict management all the times. And there's great word from God in there, but it all comes back this. It doesn't really kick off. You don't really see it explode until you put your foundation on Jesus and say, that's where I'm going with from here to the end of time, and that's it. And if he goes up, I go up. He goes down, I go down. But this is where I'm going. It's not a half and half. It's not a situation where and see, the tough thing is with the practical teaching, a lot of times as people come in, they hear that, they try it, and that's why we have, and they don't really give their foundations use. They're just trying a few things. It got better. It alleviates the tension, and they leave. Or they stay. And they think that's all following Jesus is checking a few boxes off somewhere, man. That's sad. Because some point in time, if that house is still built on the sand, it's going to fall over. And that's how we have lost people that end up in the church. I want to make it completely and perfectly clear, as much as I can. You and me especially. I know, I'm not trying to say I'm worse or better. I'm just saying we're all in the same boat. We are some jacked up, messed up people. You know what? I'm just being honest with you. You have got some stuff that you've thought or that you've done that if you would tell somebody else, that you think no one would ever talk to you again. And you want to know what? I got a list too, and I'm not telling you. Because I've got the same fears you have. And you are eternally cut off from God because you have chosen at one time or another to think that your way is better than God's and you're going to do it your way. And if he gets on with your program, that's great, but I'm not getting totally on with his program. We'll coincide. We'll kind of do a Marvel team up every now and then where we're doing some good things together, but we're not, we don't work together all the time. But that is where we are. And what Jesus says is, look, you can't live in that situation eternally. You can't continue in that situation eternally. You may make it through the end of this life, but you will crash like you have never seen in epic proportions. As soon as you die, the eternity is screwed. It is. If you don't turn and follow me, and I'm giving you the only solution, Jesus says, I'm giving you the only solution to this. It is that you commit your life to him. He said, I died for you. I paid a sacrifice. I came here. I lived on the earth. I never did anything that God would not have done in my situation because I was God and I did it. I didn't sin. And I was punished for it for everyone for all time. And because he was the Son of God, his punishment is enough. And he said, here's what I offer to you. Because I did all the heavy lifting of this, I offer you this, that you realize your situation you're in, because I don't know. And you know what? I don't know anybody who thinks they're perfect. I really don't. That if you sit across them and we're real and we're just talking over coffee or something like that, you know, no, I jacked that up. I've jacked this up. I've jacked that up in my life. Everybody knows it. But if we would admit that and say, I have no way to fix all of those things, but I will trust you, Jesus, that your sacrifice for me will rehook us to the Father, reconnect us to the Father, and that we can finish the rest of our lives learning more about who you are. And I can have the best possible life that I can know because I'm going to trust you to define that and not just me. Because I know you know more than me, and I'm going to follow you the rest of my life, and I will find out throughout eternity that what the great decision that was to make. If you will take that and trust that and put your life in his hands for that, he will change your life, and you can be unshakable. Anything else is going to fall or crumble at some time. I don't care how in shape you are. I don't care how many miles you run every day. I don't care if you're vegan and you have the superpower of vegan or whatever that is, you know. I mean, I don't care if, you know, I don't care how much money you make. I don't care what kind of job you have. I don't care if you become the person that can look at anybody in the entire world and say, look, you go get me some chips, and they have to do it. I don't care. At some point, you're going to crash and fall because Father Time's going to catch up with you, and you're going to die, and you will meet the Creator that you have pushed off for so long. And at that point, there will be no other option. There will be no loopholes. There are no appeals. You cannot call a lawyer. There is nothing in the statute. You can't run to somewhere that they don't extradite because God extradites from everywhere. That's where it is. And it comes to this decision that you make, possibly that you need to make today. Okay, I want to be unshakable, so I'm going to put my foundation on you. Not just part of it, not just a little bit of it, but the whole thing. My career, my family, my parenting, my spouse, my marriage, my future spouse, my future marriage, if I ever get to whatever, whoever I'm dating right now, you know, that car that I really want, all, you know, my job, my career, all of those things, I want to put them on the foundation of Christ. And I want you to direct me through your Holy Spirit how I'm supposed to work that stuff out. Until you put that there, you don't become unshakable, and everything else is ready to fall. But if you choose to do it your own way, and you want to dabble in Jesus every now and then, you will be like the foolish builder who built their house on the sand, and when the rains come and the streams rise, and the winds blow against that house, the house does not stand. Because there's only one way to be unshakable.
Thanks for being a part of Bay West today. Bay West Church meets at 100 Emerson Road in Palm Bay at 11 a.m. on Sundays. Please feel free to check us out at baywestchurch.org, or you can follow us on Facebook at Bay West Church.